I am so thrilled to have you join us. This is our monthly event called Death Over Tea. I was sharing with some folks before we got started that this was a project of mine that it's been going on for maybe 2.5 years. I started out as an online gathering because as maybe some of you, maybe not all of you, know that I'm an end-of-life doula, nursing background, and have kind of started this process of being an end-of-life doula. And I really was looking for a community. And so I started this group called Death Over Tea, and it's been slowly growing. And in January, Jump invited me to come to join them and also see if we can reach our local community as well. So I'm so thrilled that you are here. It's so nice to see some new faces. And we meet monthly, so it's the third Wednesday of every month at 7 p.m. And so I'm just excited that you are all here. But mostly, I'm so excited to have our speaker this evening. Thank you so much, Qwynn, for trusting us to be in the space. And you're staying up so late, right? Because it's probably getting close to your bedtime.
It's okay. Instead of tea, I have coffee in my cup. So I will be wired for a little bit, but it's totally fine. I feel like I'm with good company. So worth it.
Thank you so much. I'm going to just introduce you a little bit, if that's okay. Just like I would love for people to get to know you because you've been doing some incredible work. So I'll just read. I'm not the best reader in public, so bear with me. I'll be slow, but this is an important thing to introduce our beautiful speaker. So at the intersection of story, service, and systems transformation, Dr. Qwynn Galloway Salazar is an experienced designer redefining how nations honor, support, and accompany veterans and their loved ones as they age, face end of life, experience bereavement, and navigate survivorship. An internationally recognized applied scholar-practitioner, she integrates public health and compassionate community design to create culturally responsive, trauma-informed care experiences. As founder and CEO of In Their Honor, she leads a creative consulting practice that designs relational, community-rooted experiences using storytelling, arts-based inquiry, and community engagement to strengthen how societies understand and care for military-connected communities. Her work centers around dignity, belonging, relational healing, and cultural humility while bridging policy, practice, and lived experience to foster sustainable systems of care. Through her national leadership with Psych Armor, Dr. Galloway Salazar has shaped strategies and learning experiences that deepen military cultural competency across healthcare, education, and community systems. She is the creative architect behind Caring for Veterans Through the End of Life, a landmark course, which I just got my certificate. It is so good. Landmark course collection that has reshaped veteran-centered end-of-life education and influenced how professionals approach caregiving, grief, and moral injury across the continuum of care. She also co-leads the first global veteran-focused doula education initiative with the International Doula Life Movement, advancing interdisciplinary approaches that integrate clinical care, community support, and culturally grounded end-of-life practices. An Army veteran, spouse to a combat veteran, end-of-life doula educator, and George W. Bush Institute Veteran Leadership Scholar from the class of 2025, she has spent more than 2 decades designing environments where military-connected individuals feel seen, heard, and held. Her creative scholarship spans theater and dialogue-driven community experiences through her role as artist in residence with Grief Dialogues, including works such as In Honor in 2026, In the Wake of Life 2026, and the Grief Dialogues Memorial Day in 2025. Also, Can I Trust You performed at NWEL in 2024. Recognized as USA Today's 2024 Woman of the Year for Georgia and the inaugural Georgia Women Veteran of the Year in 2022. She contributes her expertise to national advisory bodies focused on caregiving, end-of-life care, and compassionate communities, while mentoring doctoral students and emerging scholars exploring military-connected well-being and death education. Gwen, I'm kind of starstruck here. That's a that's impressive. Like, where do you have time to sleep and raise your babies? So across stages, classrooms, and global community spaces, her work is guided by a simple conviction. Care is not a service to be delivered, but a relationship to be honored, one rooted in dignity, presence, and shared humanity. It is my greatest honor to have you join us. Thank you so much. Super
Oh my
humbled.
God.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to start off with this. I really want this conversation to be organic, and I also want to invite anyone who has any questions to please ask her some questions. This is just a organic conversation between all of us, and we have access to this incredible person, so she will be able to guide us. But I
Yeah.
wanted to first off maybe just ask you, Qwynn, about your journey. Like, how did you get where you are today? I know that there is a story behind all of this.
Yeah, there is. So as a doctoral candidate, I was working on my dissertation, and I was focusing my dissertation on transition experiences of women veterans. And I had the most uh, passionate, compassionate, excuse my language, badass mentor that was accompanying me. And her name was Dr. Kate Hendricks Thomas. And Kate, while she was my mentor, she was living with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. For you all who are in the room who are on the VA side, I'm pretty sure that you're familiar with the PACT Act and all the things that surround burn pits and exposure to toxic exposures in the Middle East. And Kate was one of the main faces of that, of the PACT Act. And, you know, while we would meet month to month, our conversations kind of grew from research to really having heartfelt existential conversations that ended up centering around end of life experiences. And I remember there was a point where she reached out and she said, "Qwynn, I've made the decision to go into hospice." And when she shared that she made the decision to go into hospice, I asked her, had anyone ever collected her oral history? At the time, she had a 7-year-old son, and I wanted her son to just know his mom was a Marine and she was just a force. And I wanted there to be something attached to the legacy of who she was and what she meant to the military community at large. So I did the oral history with her, and at the end, she challenged me. And she said to me, "I want you to move the needle on end of life care for veterans and tell our stories." This was 2021 in the middle of the pandemic. And I'm like, what are you talking about? What charge to receive, especially from someone that I knew was dying. But I honored it. So I became a hospice volunteer, and then I became a doula. And in that short time, and Christine, this is going to land for you and maybe some of the others who are familiar with doula givers. I did a podcast with Dr. Karen Wyatt, who has a podcast called End of Life University, and Suzanne O'Brien had tuned into it and started sharing my podcast. And I'm like, holy smokes. Like, if you all know the doula world, she's like one of the godmothers of the doula movement. And she reached out and she was like, how can we amplify your work? And that's truly in 2021 how it started. It was, I got charged and challenged by someone that I cared for deeply to jump in and do this work. And I said yes. And I've said yes to everything since then, as you all can see. But what I will say is it's an honor of a lifetime to get to do the work that I do. In 2020, in 2006, when I left the military, I took my uniform off, not thinking that I was going to have a career over 2 decades, still working to support service members, veterans, their families, their caregivers, and survivors. And here I am. And I look at this work and this purpose as I'm just a vessel that is here to inspire people from all over the world to do what they can to support veterans of their nations.
Beautiful. Um, I got goosebumps just hearing about the journey, and it's not been that long, right? So things
No,
have really taken off.
no, it hasn't been long at all. And it's exciting. I've always had, from the time that I was a little girl, and I was doing a podcast yesterday and I shared this story. I had a girlfriend of mine, and anyone who I'm in my 40s, so anyone who's in the room that may be in their 40s, if you remember the author R.L. Stine, does anybody remember R.L. Stine, Fear Street? I see some nods. So I had this girlfriend, and we used to play this game where one of us would play as though we were the decedent, and the other one would be a mortician. And we learned how to provide dignity and care. And we were like 7 and 8 years old. Take that years forward. She became a hospice social worker, and I became a doula. And it's so impactful how our journeys started so early on and how that work kind of chose us and we just
Yeah.
kept with it. And it's been powerful to go back to those conversations with her to say, do you remember? And how that role play allows us to show up and care for those that are in need.
It's so powerful. I think back to my experience. My grandfather had had a stroke um, when I was just a kid. I think I was about 10, and he had multiple strokes. And so we weren't able to take care of him at our house. We lived up in the mountains, and it was just really not possible for us to have him move in with us. And um, so I spent a lot of time, like probably 10 years in a nursing home. And, I was the kid that got to light the cigarettes for my grandpa. And because there was a smoking room back in the day when, this was a long time ago, lighting the cigarettes, I actually started a couch on fire.
Oh
so
no.
I didn't get to be the cigarette lighter anymore, but I think that it's true. All of these experiences that we have had helps to create this path. And I think it is a calling. It is a calling.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's such a calling, and conversations with doulas just this week, there's this big push. Let me not say push. I think the media, with Nicole Kidman sharing that she's becoming a doula, there has been this spark in becoming doulas, and I'm like, okay, that's cool if you see her and you think that this is something that you're being called to, but this work is such sacred work. Um, and it's not, I won't say it's not for everyone. I think there are elements that everyone can come and do some things, right? But really holding steadfast to, as professionals, as companions, as doulas, as end of life professionals, wherever you sit in the continuum of care, right? Like, how do we show up with great intention, with great empathy, with great compassion, so that the stigma that's related to end of life, right? How can we create um, how can we break some of those barriers where we're having more of these conversations where people feel like they're a part before there's a crisis, before a family is facing their loved one entering into hospice care or entering into that 11th hour where they're actively dying. So having conversations of this magnitude and amplifying it all over, whether it's conversations about the military veteran community or other minority communities or just people as a whole. I love to see this happening across the nation because it brings like-minded people from different races, places, all in to have a heartfelt conversation on truly what matters.
So important. So I just want to say thank you so much for the work that you've done with Psych Honor, because I just finished my training, Caring for Veterans Through End of Life, Compassionate Communities. I learned so much, and I really feel as if after taking the training, there's so much that I need to learn. And so if you were to maybe help us to understand what it's like, because I understand that there are certain needs that are different. And one of the things that really popped out to me about what was mentioned in the training is just understanding military culture, for one. And I'm just going to share quickly, my dad was a Vietnam veteran. He never spoke about his experience until one time he was drinking heavily one night and he wanted to share with me his experience, and I just couldn't go there with him. And I really deeply regret not being able to support him. And so he had a cancer diagnosis and had passed away very quickly. And so I think about missed opportunities. So can you kind of expand on what would be supportive for a caregiver on, because it is a different population and I want to be sensitive and more
Tot-
mindful moving forward.
Totally. Thank you for sharing your family story. Um, when I think of cultural competency, I often share that it's such a loaded term, right? How can you ever be fully competent about anything? Because things change. When you look at the veteran community, we are not a monolith. We have different identities, different, just a whole bunch of things wrapped in to the tapestry of who we are. But when I look at cultural competence, it's also ensuring that we have a degree of cultural humility and cultural sensitivity to those that we're serving. Um, but I'll back it up, and I often share with providers and professionals, when you're working with an aging veteran, when you're working with a veteran that's at the end of life, know a little bit about the generation in which they serve. So when we think about Korean War veterans, for example, let me back that up. When we think about World War II veterans, they were the greatest generation. They came back home. VSO started. There were welcome home celebrations for them, and they were the pillar of what it looked like to serve. But then when you think about the Korean War, those veterans came home. They were the forgotten generation. And when we're looking at our aging population now, it's the Vietnam veterans. And that generation of veterans, we know historically what it was like. The war was televised. They came home, they were spat at, they were called horrible names. Many of them have lived with the trauma of that experience for decades, where they've isolated. They did not want to share those stories. They often share that they didn't know or still don't know who to trust. Fast forward, we think about Gulf War, Desert Storm, Iraq and Afghanistan. And that's a different generation too, because that was the age of media, fast news, all of those things. The minute we heard something happening in Iraq or Afghanistan and it hit here, something else was happening. So there's always been this thing of what's going on next. And so it's so important that we pause, know a little bit about the generation or the person that you're serving. I always share with providers that are external to VA, ask the question, have you served in the armed forces? Please do not ask the question, are you a veteran? Because everyone is not going to respond with the affirmative response. Asking the question, have you served in the armed forces, allows a conversation to start. What I've found, and having spent years in suicide prevention, when you ask the question, have you served, are you a veteran? You have some veterans who served who've never went to combat. So they don't see themselves as veterans. They stayed stateside. They don't see that their experience in service shapes up to be an equal to someone who served in combat. We have to be able to break that, right? Change that messaging and honor work that they did, honor the legacy that they have in service. So um, when we started, when I had the idea of caring for veterans through the end of life, it was built on PsychArmor's flagship course, 15 Things Veterans Want You to Know. My dear friend, Dr. Heidi Kraft, is the golden, I tell her all the time, she is the golden voice behind 15 Things. But we started having these conversations in terms of, okay, we have 15 things veterans want you to know, but what are the 15 things veterans want you to know as they're approaching the end of life? So that was kind of how Caring for Veterans Through the End of Life was born, but we decided to make each course 5 things. So you have 5 things that are totally focused on what compassionate communities can do, 5 things for healthcare providers. And if you're a healthcare provider, there are CMEs that are now attached to that course. And then there's a course specifically for caregivers. That course for caregivers was sparked because I was working with so many caregivers and families that said, I didn't know what my loved one experienced in Vietnam. They never shared it. And now I'm starting to hear bits and pieces, and I don't know what to do. And that's heavy because you're caring for someone that's at the end of their lives, but you're also wanting to figure out how can you heal some of those experiences and some of those wounds, right? And when you think of caregivers, for the most part, this is their first time caring for someone at the end of life. So that's an education in its own. So what are some of those things that we need to have those conversations about so caregivers are a little bit prepared in terms of the emotional, in terms of the trauma-informed care that they need to know, on top of caring for that veteran as they are approaching end of life. So that was really the premise of those courses, was to make it something tangible, heart-centered, that would really allow anyone who takes the course the opportunity to have a quick call to action to do something. So each one of those courses comes with a journal for you to work on. I love coloring books. So Christine, if you noticed in those journals, there's a coloring page, I think, in each one of them. And that was so intentional. We had a graphic artist create each one of those just for those courses because that, right? Like I'm also into the arts. There's something about coloring and what it does to the nervous system that's therapeutic. And I wanted myself and my trusted advisors, we wanted those courses to give a holistic feel to those that are in the space and in the work of caring for our veterans.
So good, so good. There were some questions that popped up that were super helpful for me.
Okay.
That I was like, oh, I've got to remember these. The questions to ask,
Yep.
which really helped me to understand, and I'll read them. How did your time in the military shape who you are today? Are there any relationships from your military service that has positively impacted you or that you remember fondly? Are there still any relationships from your military services that still weigh heavy on your heart? And is there anything you would like to talk about or share regarding your military experience that you have not had the chance to before? And
Mhm.
I'm afraid to ask that question, Qwynn. I'm afraid to ask that question because I'm not sure how I would respond. I think I would know. I mean, I've cared for veterans, but I also want to be open to holding that space. And so I want to see how you would respond to that.
You said the magic words in terms of holding space. There, silence sometimes is golden. You know, there are moments where someone will share something on their heart that they've never shared before, and they're not looking for you to fix it. They're looking for the opportunity to release it. And so what I've learned, one of the very first veterans I worked with, he was a Korean War veteran, and I would just sit and listen. And there was so much healing in just sitting and listening, not judging, not saying to him, I know, and dot, 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 just being present, simply holding someone's hand, affirming their experiences, right? Not saying, just being very mindful in terms of how you respond, but just affirming, saying something to the magnitude of that must have been, I'm wondering, right? Um, but also knowing that for some, they don't want to share, but giving them the opportunity to share if and when they're comfortable. I tell folks all the time, you have to pass muster, right? Before a veteran is going to be willing to share anything about their experiences with you, they've got to know that they can trust you. They've got to know that if they share something with you that is extremely painful, that your facial expression is not going to show that you are completely out of your mind with what they just shared. So it's really coming to each one of those bedsides or each one of those appointments just with a blank slate, just that cultural humility to say, tell me what you want me to know about your experience. Tell me what matters most to you. Instead of focusing on that checklist of what's the matter with you, start with what matters most to you. Open-ended questions. For those that are clinicians in the room, open-ended questions. Yes, that first question, have you served in the armed forces? Yes, it's closed-ended. But after that, move to open-ended, an open-ended conversation. Are there any regrets, any unfinished business, any guilt, any shame, the need for forgiveness? Huge. I've had the opportunity of a lifetime to be mentored by the one and only Deborah Grassman. And just learning from her decades of caring for veterans in the VA system, how the soul has injuries. And so we spend time when there's this medical diagnosis focusing on the medical aspect. But how do we help heal some of the wounds of the soul? So practicing ritual, right? What does ritual look like? Maybe it's journaling. Maybe it's bringing in a veteran, right? That can come alongside of you, that that camaraderie is there, right? That veteran that you're caring for may open up a bit more, knowing that this person that you're bringing in has a similar lived experience because of service as well. So it's being a little bit creative in terms of how can I meet them where they are and provide them the supports that they need, and not being afraid to screw things up, right? Like, if ask for forgiveness. If you screw it up, ask for forgiveness and then figure out what's the next thing that will work. um, that's what matters.
Mhm. So good. I'm a big fan of Reiki, and I have done Reiki for probably hundreds of hospice clients. And I remember a veteran that I cared for. He was open to complementary therapies, and he had some fears about what the end of life experience would be like for him. And he was like, he was super anxious, and he was transitioning. He was getting close, and I said, well, let's just try it and see if you're open to it. And he was like, yeah, let's just try it. He was immediately out. He went to sleep. He was so deeply relaxed. He hadn't slept in days because his anxiety was keeping him up. He was in that restless stage. He was really struggling. And after I asked him, if do you want me to wake you up or do you want me to let you sleep? And he said, I'd like you to wake me up afterwards. And so we had a conversation. How was that experience? And he just burst into tears and said, I'm no longer afraid to die.
Mm.
And I don't know what happened in that session, except for I do feel that when we think about the physical death, there's a spiritual death. There are so many things that are happening beyond my comprehension. And so when I think about creating space for someone, I love not talking at all. Just holding that space and just being that presence for them is super powerful.
It's so powerful. As humans, we always want to fill the atmosphere with words, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's just not necessary. Your presence, your intention when you're there, lean in, turn your phones off, ask for permission to touch, right? Because when we think of our veterans, we also have to think of post-traumatic stress. We have to think of experiences with military sexual trauma. So before you touch, ask for permission first. But just that human connection,
Mhm. Mhm.
it's one of a kind.
It is one of a kind.
And you don't need, yes, textbooks are important. Yes, what we learn professionally is important, but the compassion at the end, it's what's needed the most.
One of the things that really struck me in the training, Quinn, was the what really meant a lot to me to hear about the losses. You know, the veterans in particular have had losses that not everybody has experienced. You know, when it was mentioned, you know, maybe they weren't there for the birth of their child, maybe they weren't there for the graduation of their child, or these big life events. And so when I think about, you know, us just living our lives, you know, the folks that are serving are experiencing, they're having a different experience than what we're experiencing here. And so um, I think about, so I guess I think about grief on a much deeper level, about these losses that happen. And then also the other thought about underreporting pain, that really hit me hard. And I was wondering if you can speak to that as well.
Stoicism,
I
right? At
can't
the
say the word.
core. It took me a long time to say that word too, so don't feel bad. It's so funny. I did. There's Psych Armor has what's called a caring minute, and so if you follow Psych Armor on LinkedIn or socials, last week I believe I did a whole piece, a whole caring minute on stoicism. And culturally, you think about how um, pain, how I've got to be strong, how I have to have it all together. That's ingrained in many of us. The idea of not wanting to ask for additional help or the thought of being a burden weighs heavy. So, as clinicians or as providers, when you're looking at that pain scale, it's okay to go a little deeper and have that conversation about, hey, if you are experiencing a significant degree of pain, you aren't less than because you're sharing that, right? It's okay to share that you're in pain, so that we can prescribe you or get you what you need. But addressing that is important because stoicism, providers share so much about. It's so hard to work with veterans at the end of life because they're so stoic. They are a hard population to get across to get the information we need in terms of what's going on, in terms of their pain or their symptoms. And it's like, okay, just sit tight with them and really talk about, if you're in this degree of pain, let's talk about things that we can do, right? Maybe it looks like the pain chart with the faces on it, whatever that looks like in 2026, but being open and also sharing that it's not a sign of weakness to say that you're in pain, right? Like, it's a sign of courage and strength to be willing to share that. And let's work together to get that under control.
Yeah. I wanted to open it up. Does anyone have any questions for Quinn? We're talking. It's like I'm having this great conversation. I want to include you. Yeah, come on up.
I just have a question.
Can you come up to the mic so that our online community can hear you, and let us know who you are? Thank you so much for coming. Actually, the mic's right up there.
Oh, okay. So I'm Allison.
Hi, Allison.
Hi. So I have a question. What do you mean by you are a doula? What does that mean?
Mhm.
Like,
So
what
when
does that entail?
yeah. So when I first became an end of life doula, I was at the bedside. And so I was caring for veterans that were dying. I realized that my niche was to care for veterans that were actively dying. And so being a doula for me means I companion those that are dying, but I also companion their families, right? Not just through the dying process, but also in that bereavement, that grief process as well. Um, I served as a doula hardcore for about a year or so, and then my work moved into education. So one of the things that Suzanne O'Brien has shared with me is I doula the doulas, in terms of caring for veterans. And so when you look at a lot of doulas, and I think there's this thought that all doulas are at the bedside. You have some doulas that strictly focused on advanced care planning. You have doulas that focus on Reiki. You have doulas that focus on being at the bedside, doulas that focus on a multitude of things as it relates to the end of life. But where I sit now in my career, it's really about education and sharing this work with doulas that are doing the work firsthand.
Thank you for that question. I'm so glad that you're here.
Yes, yes.
I know our online community, thank you for the people that are here online. Please feel free to just raise your digital hand, or if you want to put something in the chat, we are open to that as well. You know,
Yeah.
Qwynn, I wanted to ask you about how can caregivers create a greater sense of safety, trust, and dignity for our veterans?
Ooh. You know, recent numbers on our military caregivers, I think we're looking at 14.15 or 14 or 15.3 million caregivers. And when I think about that population, I think about just the work that it takes in being a caregiver. The work that it takes to being a caregiver, taking care of the home, maybe caregivers are working at the same time. But hearing from caregivers is this thought that they don't want to be burdens on anyone. And I think one of the greatest things that caregivers can do is to, one, kind of how we all have identities, right? And we identify, it's okay to say, I'm a caregiver. Because sometimes when we say, I'm a caregiver, that allows for other people to show up, right? Recently, I was a caregiver to my dad. My dad passed away just December, and my community showed up. So many in the death space showed up. I'd come home and there'd be groceries on my doorstep because people knew that I was a caregiver. The question comes up so much in our communities where we say to caregivers, if you need something, just let me know. Caregivers oftentimes don't know or don't have the time to tell you they need something. Let's just be real, right? But what are the things that you know? You know that everyone needs tissue paper. I think we're all family here, so we're just going to go there. People need tissue paper. People need to eat. People need companionship. If you know that there are children in the house, they need to get out and get fresh air, go to a park. What are those things that you can do to support caregivers? I think we put such a burden on caregivers to tell us what they need, and then there's this disconnect. And caregivers continue to isolate because they're just trying to figure it out the best way that they can. But if you look at your own needs as a human, what are those things that you can do to show up for caregivers, right? Prime example, there's a gentleman, I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and there's an organization here called the Johns Creek Veterans Association. They reached out to me maybe 3 years ago and said, hey, Qwynn, we'd love for you to come and talk to our group about being a doula and what you do and how you can support some of us. Right after that training, one of their members ended up getting sick, was placed in a long-term care facility. His wife was his primary caregiver, came to visit him one day, left that night, and they were an elderly couple, maybe in their 80s, and he died. The association reached back out to me and said, we lost one of our own and he died alone. And we don't ever want that to happen again on our watch. Can you help us? And I said, absolutely. And so what we ended up creating was a community grassroots initiative called the 11th Hour Squadron, where those members of that Veterans Association, which was primarily Vietnam veterans, they became an extension of the family. So if they knew that there was a veteran within a 20-mile radius to them that was actively dying, they took shifts, 12-hour shifts, to provide the family respite, to provide that one-on-one camaraderie with that veteran. If there were stories that veteran wanted to share, when I tell you what they created that was grassroots, has been so powerful for that community, to the point where West Point has started funding the work that they're doing. And it simply started with the group saying, we want to make sure that we're supporting the caregivers while they're caring for our siblings in arms. And so there's so many things that can be done that's grassroots. We often talk about evidence-based practices. Love them, love them, love them. But what are some simple things that you can do today that can provide care for that caregiver who may be experiencing compassion fatigue, burnout? I will say burnout again, trauma, secondary trauma. How can we show up? Maybe it's bringing tea. Maybe it's, saying, hey, I'm going to cut your lawn. What are those things? We all have a responsibility to come alongside of each other and show up in support and care. Once again, you don't have to have a myriad of degrees to show care. It's being intentional and being present. When I look at the 11th Hour Squadron now, I think they have like 40 volunteers at this point. The very first group, there was a gentleman in that group, and I received a newsletter yesterday that that gentleman is on hospice care. My immediate reaction was to reach out and say, hey, do you guys need me to come in and help? And then I paused and I said, they have almost 40 volunteers. How beautiful it is to know that he will receive the care that he deserves as one of the first cohorts of that program. And that's what's happening. And so how do we do that again and again? So San Diego State University has the Center for Aging and Longevity. And we are piloting a whole project, an evaluation project of the 11th Hour Squadron. We're going to call it something else, to look at how civic engagement and how communities can get involved in caring for veterans through the end of life. Not just the medical model, but the relational model, and then moving that into everybody. How can we show up compassionately for everybody? So, watching my mom, and this is, a heart moment, watching my mom care for my dad. My mom is 83 years old. My dad was 87 years old. And watching my mom care for someone who became bedbound was hard. And as a doula, there were moments where my husband would say to me, he doesn't need you to be his doula, he needs you to be his daughter. And I understood that. But what I learned from that experience was what what caregivers are really facing alone and in isolation, and how it impacts their mental health. We know that there are numbers that are climbing in suicides in caregivers because of that isolation, because of that disconnect. And there's something that we all can do to show up and support.
So important. I don't know the statistics off the top of my head, but I know it's high about the caregiver actually has their end of life experience before their loved one, because they oftentimes just
Yep.
aren't caring for themselves, and that
Yeah.
that breaks my heart. But as a hospice nurse, I was seeing it, that they weren't
Yep.
going to their appointments. There was one caregiver the whole time, and it's painful to watch. So I love the idea of building community. I love the whole 11th Hour Squadron. I think that's beautiful.
They're my heart. Every time they ask me to come back, I come back. Whenever they call, I'm like, I'm coming, I'm coming, because it's so beautiful to witness communities putting action to saying thank you for your service. And watching these veterans choose to have a second service. There's one gentleman in that group. I want to say he was a physician, an Army physician, and he's in his 80s as well. And he volunteers. And his thing is, just make sure you put me on a shift where it's daylight, because I no longer drive at night. And it's just absolutely beautiful how they rally around and how they become this extension of the family. And some of their volunteers are not they're not connected to the military. They just see the good in the work and they want to be a part of sustaining that work. And that's powerful. I love that group with every part of me.
I can imagine. I can imagine. I think about, I mention this a lot, but I think it's worth mentioning again. When I was just discovering Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, there is okay, so I'll just share a little story. So my dad he was at the Veterans Hospital in San Francisco, and and I didn't know what to do. This was like 16 years ago. I didn't know what to do. I had been with people before when they passed away, but I didn't really know what to do. This was the first time losing my dad. And when they finally were able to get his symptoms under control, I didn't know what to do with the space because he was not talking and he wasn't eating. And the hospice nurse said, "Does your dad like music?" And I was like, "He loves music." And so she burned a CD, yeah, back in the day when you burned CDs, and she burned Willie Nelson, "You Are Always on My Mind." So we listened to that over and over and over again, and I still I'm brought to tears each time I hear that song. And then she's like, "This one's kind of new agey, but you might like it." And so it was this beautiful music, and you could just see my dad just soften to the music. So we played that over and over and over again. And so after my dad passed away, it was a beautiful passing. He was very peaceful, and I got to be there. I was the only one. And eventually, I left and I was really torn. I really wanted that CD, but I was like, "Oh, I'll leave it for someone else." So I left it. And the clinic that I worked at, there was a pediatric oncologist doctor that I worked with, and she was like, "I think I'd like to gift this to you." And it was a CD set of the exact music that I was listening to with my dad. And it's called Graceful Passages. And so it's a 2-set CD, although you can get it on YouTube now, but one is just the music, and then the other one is with words. And in that CD set is Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who I just love so much. She said herself, there are really only 2 things that were asked at the end of life. And in my mind, I'm thinking there's 3, but she asks how we did with our ability to give love, and how was our ability to receive love. And I think receiving love is hard for a lot of us. Giving is so easy. And then how we were of service. And so I think, when we put our head on a pillow at night, and I think ultimately we all want to be supportive, but we don't know what to do. And so oftentimes, just showing up for people in whatever way that looks like could be really meaningful for everyone. And just normalize, we still want to have fun and talk and play. And, it's not all doom and gloom. We can share these experiences and stories, but it's really powerful and I think that I think it helps the people that really want to help, because we don't know what to do. And so just showing up and just kind of being with them is enough. Like just being there is enough.
I love that. The gentleman that I cared for that was a Korean War veteran, we would get together, I would go visit him, and he wanted to talk about the Rat Pack. And he shared so many stories with me about Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. And I would just listen. There were moments he didn't want no longer talk about his military experience. He found someone that just was freaking listening to him. And we would just sit and we would talk, and he would just share about music of his time and cars of his time. And that's what seemed to bring him peace. And I didn't have to have, right? Like, I didn't have to have those answers. I just was willing to listen and to lean in and to learn. And music is like a gift that connects hearts and minds, right? What does that look like? Bringing music into the space. When folks are in that phase of dying, one of the last things to go is their hearing. What was the music that was powerful to them in their era, right? Bringing that to them is a gift. I had to write that down, Graceful Passages.
It's so good.
Had to. And maybe that's something we all do, right? Once you get back to home or wherever, find it, share it on your socials. Like let's amplify that, because to me, that's a simple strategy that we can just share out. and people that are doing this work can receive it and say, okay, let me go to YouTube or maybe Spotify and download it. And you never know when you're going to be able to use it or when you're going to need it. Small, but big.
It is very
Yeah.
big.
Yeah.
So good, so good. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is, through your work, Qwynn, what have veterans taught you about life
Ooh.
and living?
That's a really good question. And I think it goes back to the Kubler-Ross model, is that love, right? And I hear it, I've heard it so many times. Does my family know that I love them? When I leave, will they really know how much I loved and I cared about them? And so, working in this space, in the death space, allows me to show up every single day and live with intention every day, because the reality is there's going to be a day when there is no more of that. And so, living on purpose, being willing to be vulnerable, being willing to show up, being willing to hold someone's hand when it's extremely difficult. Um, I can't say enough about how much they've taught me in the power of love and forgiveness of self. Sometimes hearing stories of what folks have left on the battlefield and how they've carried that for years has taught me it's okay to forgive myself for some of the foolish things that I've done in my lifetime. Who am I not to, right? Forgiving myself or forgiving others is a gift. And so being able to companion veterans and their loved ones, and learning about their stories, right? Also, the importance of carrying those legacies on and saying their names. So I often talk about Kate. I talk about one of my other mentors, Kim. She was an Army veteran that died from a glioblastoma, and a few others that I carry so close with me. Is how important to share your story and let the world know that you lived.
And
Uh,
keep saying their names out loud.
their names out loud. And, I'll tie that piece in. So 2024, I had the chance. If you're not familiar with NWELL, please check out NWELL. NWELL is the TEDx of death and dying. That's the best way. It takes, it takes Hollywood and end of life professionals and everything in between. And we all meet in Los Angeles every November. And I had the chance to perform in 2024. The day before my performance, my husband, he accompanied me on that trip, and I said to him, I'm going to do something in theater. And he's looking at me and he's like, okay, you've already like the doula whole thing and end of life whole thing and now theater whole thing. He's like, what are we doing here? And I'm like, it's going to make sense one day, I promise. And what I shared with him that day was, when you look at the Mexican culture with Dia de los Muertos or Day of the Dead, there's such this power in saying the names, in remembrance, in legacy, and in honor. And I remember saying to my husband's Mexican American, I said to him, the way your culture celebrates that, I would love to see aspects of that be brought back into Memorial Day. Memorial Day for many around this country is the start of summer. We have these celebrations, these cookouts, all these things. I had someone recently say, Happy Memorial Day. And I'm like, okay, let's educate a little bit more about what Memorial Day is and its difference from Veterans Day. And let's choose to be intentional with how we show up for that day. So what ended up happening, there's a woman, an amazing woman by the name of Elizabeth Copeland. She's the founder of Grief Dialogues. She met me down at the stage after I came off stage at NWELL and said, we need to talk. And I'm like, yes, ma'am. Long story short, we partnered together and we came up with Grief Dialogues Memorial Day, where we co-produced a theater production in Los Angeles. And when I tell you opening the space, so about 3 months prior to the show, we started on socials. Send us the names. Send us names of those that were lost in combat, those that were lost through suicide, those that had illnesses that they came back to that were connected to their military experiences. And we created this virtual wall. It started as a virtual wall, but when we produced the show in LA, each one of those names, we said each one of those names, and we lit candles for each one of those veterans. And the audience members, we had a block of time where they were able to share the story of their own veteran, right? And the way that that community engaged, we had civilians in that space that came in with a whole different thought of what Memorial Day was and left with a whole different thought of what Memorial Day truly is. And it's that community engagement to say, okay, in this shared space, we can learn so much from one another, but there's power in honoring the legacies of those that served. So that one show in LA has now morphed into a whole theater production called In Honor. We're actually going to San Antonio in October during Muertos Fest. And our In Honor show in San Antonio in October is going to be, the theme is honoring the legacy of those that have died by suicide. And so, looking at the work, sometimes I've had people say, my gosh, you've done so much in such a short time. There's so much that needs to be done. And I look at it from the standpoint of being able to hit the education piece, right? And educating folks, the academic piece and working with researchers, but also the theater piece, because it's a connection to community and in ways to engage. And so no one's path is going to look the same, right? I look at the work that I do. Every day there's a new opportunity. And I'm like, okay, do I have time to do that? Is this the right thing for me? If it is, yes, I'm willing to partner to do the things that will ensure, when we talk about the good death, I like to think of it in terms of the supported death. And I want folks to be able to feel equipped to support someone in death.
I'm really bummed I missed the end well. I was planning on going the last 2 years. I really would have loved to have gone, but I think Suzanne's going to be there this year, so we should meet down there.
I will be there. I will be there this year. So
Oh, excellent.
yeah, yes. I have to say it. If you haven't been, go. It's or if you don't have the opportunity to go, you can go to endwellproject.org and you can see the past few years, right? You can see the shows from the past few years. So there's that.
And I think you can participate online, but I think the energy in the room would be amazing to be a part of that.
It is. When people think about the work that we do, it's like, isn't it like sad and gloomy? And I'm like, you know what? It is the most fulfilling work I've ever done. I wake up and I'm like, okay, what's coming, right? I was talking to a mortician earlier today, and we were talking about just the work that she's doing. And I'm like, how can we have these conversations where the stigma is just no longer attached and we want to be eager to learn more and bring a level of public awareness into I don't even want to say this work, because it's a part of life. How do we do that, right? When I walk into spaces and I say I'm a death doula or I'm a death educator, initially there were looks of like I'm the Grim Reaper. And I'm like, I'm so not. I'm in all these wild colors. However, I want to design something with you, for you, so that when your end of life experience comes, as close to what you want it to look like, you can have that.
Yeah.
Right? Versus those decisions being made for you. or without you. Let's be intentional to have those thoughts about what we want. In my own closet, I have a just in case bag. My outfits in there, my DD214s are in there, my wishes are in there so that there are no questions. And maybe that's a type A in me, right? To lay my own self stuff out. But every day that I walk into my closet and I see that bag hanging up, I realize I am aware of my mortality. I am aware that it's an honor and it's a blessing to be standing straight up, upright today. That may not be tomorrow. So, how do I live with purpose and intention for the time that I have?
It's such a powerful reminder. You know, we're all going to get there, right? It's going to happen for each of us, some sooner than others. But I do feel like, you know, Suzanne talks about living each day as if it's its own mini lifetime. And I really feel like this morning I didn't want to go to the gym, but I went to the gym and I felt so good afterwards. But I was just like, oh, you know, and then I was like, oh my gosh, suck it up, Buttercup. I get to go to the gym today, you know, and I really want to just be mindful about like today's a pretty darn good day. And so, you know, it's a powerful it's a powerful feeling, emotion to know that there are so many last breaths that are being taken right now as we are meeting together. And so how can I infuse as much joy and kind of forget about the small stuff? I really feel like that has really helped me to things that I used to think were so important. They don't feel like they're so important anymore. I don't really sweat the small stuff too much anymore. I mean, I do worry sometimes, but I do overall feel like it really has created this beautiful lens of perspective. You know, I wanted to ask you about the work that you've done with veterans in particular, because I think that there are some practical and spiritual needs, emotional needs that's different. And I kind of wanted to circle back around to that, if you don't mind, Qwynn, about um, there's something that I'm curious about of how we can support people that have identifying, you know, if they've been a combat veteran or not, and um, how can we support them more than just the physical needs and their spiritual needs, practical needs that might be different. And I just kind of wanted to circle back around that because I have a bunch of questions in my head. So can you help me
Yeah,
with
yeah.
that?
Um, I think support looks different for everyone. There is another group that we've partnered with alongside of my work in Psych Armor called the Conversation Project. Is anyone familiar with the work of the Conversation Project? I see hands, right? Love the Conversation Project. If you have not, that's a resource. They have PDFs on their website that actually give you prompts and scripts and guides to talk through all of that, right? And the Conversation
Okay.
Project has been a huge asset in talking about the physical, the spiritual, the mental, the whole holistic side of care. Um, but when we're looking at veterans, right, I think our culture is what sets us apart a bit. You know, the minute we raise our right hand, we're already talking about death and dying because as soon as we're finished raising our right hand, not long after, we're also signing paperwork to say, just in case something happens to me. So, with that being ingrained in our minds already, right? Like we see death completely different from the beginning. Our cultural experiences from service to um, just from branches all the way from the different branches all the way to if you deployed, if you did not deploy, what was the era that you served in. I think it's just really important that we know a little bit about it, about each, as we're working with each patient or each client. First, of course, allowing them to share with us what they want to share, but building from that, right? Like if you are working with a veteran that is suffering from Parkinson's disease, for example, and they served in Vietnam, right? Knowing a little bit about the history, about what that looks like, and how that's a service connected illness that is tied to serving in Vietnam. So, I have to say, like the Conversation Project, we did one of their workbooks too, where we partnered and we started sharing it with hospice organizations and long-term care facilities to say, start using these as resources while you're working with your veterans, because some of these questions that are embedded in this document will give you more answers in terms of how to empower them, how to allow them to make the decisions that are best for them and what they want. I also think there's another document. The Department of Veterans Affairs has a survivorship program, and there is a document. It's called, I think, the Legacy Toolkit, if I'm not mistaken. And Christine, I can shoot you an email and send that. It's a PDF, but has every form that you can possibly think of that someone would need if they know that their veteran is dying or if their veteran just died, right? You think about that time, your mind is everywhere, but having that and having it ready, right? If you're a doula, if you're a social worker, having a copy ready where you have all the forms you need, you know, there's questions in that legacy toolkit that get down to the nitty gritty in terms of who do you want your pallbearers to be, right? Like there's so much that we can do on the front end to get so many questions and so many things answered prior to someone's death that will allow them to have that good death or that supported death that we've been talking about. And it's just knowing where the resources are and having that toolbox ready to be accessible when it's needed.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
What does honoring someone in their honor truly mean to you? I love that is your passion, that is your legacy that you're creating. So what does that mean to you in their honor?
Oh, when I first came up with that name, it kind of hit me and I didn't know why, right? It took me a while for it to make sense. And in their honor truly means to me, you have people that have raised their right hands to serve and defend this nation. And oftentimes they come home and we share platitudes around holidays, or we see a veteran with a hat and we say, thank you for your service. And that's as far as it goes. Sometimes you have veterans that hear the term, thank you for your service. And you're like, what am I supposed to say following that? You don't even know what I did with my service, right? So there are these things, but in their honor means taking it a step further. So for me, I choose action with thanking someone for their service, and it's my honor to do so. It's my honor to share a bit of their legacy, to collect their stories, to help them find meaning, making meaning of their lived experiences before they die, helping their families make meaning of their experiences, bridging the community with that family. That's what it truly means to me when I say in their honor. In their honor, I do this work because our freedom isn't free. There's costs associated with that. And so 20 plus years later, 19-year-old Qwynn would have never thought that I'd be doing this work. Still, I had ideas of becoming an FBI agent and all these wild other ideas. Never would have imagined that this would be the but it's an honor for this to be my journey.
Well,
And I'm
I'm
just
so
a
grateful.
vessel, just a vessel. I'm just the vessel. I don't have all the answers. I am just a vessel that's willing to show up alongside of people, communities, organizations to say, you have an idea, you want to spark it, you want to be inspired, let's do it. If it's going to change or impact one person's death, the way a family processes the loss, I'm here, sign me up. And I realized that it's a ripple effect, right? I talked about Kate being my mentor. There is a doula training organization called the Peaceful Presence Project, and they're located in Bend, Oregon. And I received, this was a few years ago, I had received a LinkedIn message from this woman that said, hey, I am becoming a doula and I'm taking the Peaceful Presence Projects training. And one of the resources was a podcast you did, and you shared your experiences with caring for veterans. And I'm a Marine, and it hit home when I was caring for my Marine sister as she was dying. Long story short, she's in Bend. My mentor, Kate, is in Arlington, and that's who she was talking about. And that ripple effect turned into me going to Central Oregon, partnering with Kate's Marine sister to create a volunteer program for veterans who wanted to care for other aging veterans and veterans that were dying. And so I look at it, and that was meeting the needs of Central Oregon, right? On a ranch. I live in the city. I don't know anything about that, but we were on a farm. We like meeting the community right where they were, and just the stories that have come out of that. And it's beautiful because it's hard work, but it's heart work. Um, and it's an honor. She challenged me, and it's an honor to keep doing it.
Oh, I love that so much. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for all of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions? How are we all doing? The air feels good
Oh.
now. It was getting a little warm in here, Qwynn.
Oh,
So
no.
yeah, we're good now. Anybody have any questions? I'll
And
check
I'll
with
say
our
this, maybe
Yeah,
the
go ahead.
question may not arise tonight. Maybe it may arise in the middle of the night while you're sleeping. Don't hesitate to reach out to me. Do not, please do not hesitate to reach out. If there is a way that you have an idea and you want to spark something, you all are part of my community now. And Christine, I'm sure can tell you, I answer all my own messages. Um, right? Give me
I
like
was like,
48
she
hours, but
answered.
I answer my own messages. And truly I see this as a collaboration, right? To really make change and shift paradigms. Yes, May, I'm looking and I'm
Yes.
like, okay, it's late and I want to be respectful. Yes. Tell us
Yes,
your name.
I'm Amanda.
Okay.
I don't have a question, so we won't keep you here too much longer, but I just wanted to say thank you
Yeah.
because I work in the ER. I'm kind of new to death and dying space. We try not to let people die in the ER, even though it is a natural thing. So it's looked down upon there. But I
Mm.
often think of death and dying in a cultural way as kind of spirituality and religion and like what is from the point of death moving forward. And I think what I really learned from you today is that cultural competency is about the life you lived, and specifically with veterans, like the era that they're in and the generation. And I think that can be translated to so many people at the time of death to consider
Yeah.
just a humility in how you approach them and the life they led is sort of that most important piece. So thank you. I learned a lot.
Absolutely. You know, Amanda, when I know that I am supporting a Vietnam veteran, one of the things that I will always say is welcome home. So many of them were not welcomed home. And I will say welcome home and pause. And I can be honest, most of the times the reactions are the same. I see the eyes glassy. I see, the chiseled face that's tight because they haven't heard it. And saying to them, welcome home, gives them that freedom to know that they matter and someone sees them.
Beautiful.
Hey, Qwynn, thank you so much. And I love that. I had a vet tell me that was the best thing to say to them was welcome home. And I really appreciated that. I just wanted to bring your attention and see if you know about this tool, because I just found it this week. And whenever I find a new tool, I always want to share it because I get super, super excited. So it's through Stanford Education. Are you familiar with the Letter Project? So
No,
what they have done, so it's pretty freaking amazing. If you go to med.stanford.edu letter, they have a letter that's already done up, and I brought some here for everybody. It's actually a letter that you write, and it gives you a chance to do a life review with 7 different tasks. And I think that there's also one for vets. I don't quote me on that, but just look at Stanford, and it is amazing. And basically, it's based a lot on the Ho'oponopono. So, like life review 1 is acknowledging the people in your life, remembering key moments, asking for forgiveness, forgiving others, saying thank you, saying I love you, and saying goodbye. And it's super exciting, and it's been out since like 2019, but I just came across it, so it's Stanford. And it's the Letter Project. And they have all kinds of fabulous videos where they've interviewed people that have been involved in this process. It's beautiful. So another tip, another free resource.
thank you for sharing. Hey, Christine, I'm putting work on your plate and your team's plate. What I would ask of each and every one of you, if there's a resource that you know of, just grab a quick piece of paper and write that resource down. And Christine, let's, once this recording goes out or however you put it out, let's share that. Let's share those resources far and wide. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ah.
Thank you. So good. Oh my gosh. So anyone on our online community, Chris, thanks so much for posting about he did put in the chat, or Chris, I'm not sure. The Boise has a veteran ministry called Mission 43. So thank you for sharing that. I will add that to the list as well. Thank you so much. So good.
That is so good.
Anyone else have any questions? How are you guys doing? Yeah, so good, so good. Do you have any last minute things, Qwynn? I know it's really late, and I do want you to go to sleep tonight. You've shared so much, but I think one last thing, when you look at your life and this work, what do you hope veterans and families remember most about the care they received?
Oh. I'm gonna flip that a little bit. In our military spaces, we always have a good acronym. And let me ask the question, are there any service members or veterans or military family members? Okay. And if you're virtual, if you can throw a heart, or so we will use acronyms to the ground. And HOPE is a huge acronym for me. And when I think of the term hope, it's hearing other people's experiences. And when I think about legacy, it's, for me, I look at and I'm hopeful that we continue to share stories with one another and use them sometimes as case studies to figure out how can we do a better job, right? Assessing where we didn't do the best, assessing how it could look different. And for generations to come, learning from what we didn't fully get right, how can we make it better? How can we be more culturally competent? How can we look at minority populations? Till this day, when people think of a veteran, they see a white male Vietnam veteran. 9 out of 10 times, they don't see me. I can't tell you how many times I've went to the Home Depot, right, in my community, and I pull into the veteran spot, and I'll have people give me that look, and I give them back that look like, wait a minute, I earned this right too. But there's this level of awareness and messaging that we've got to continue doing. I'm hopeful that we'll continue to do that. If you are in organizations, if you're in hospice organizations, for example, or medical organizations, medical facilities rather, your websites, what does it look like, right? If I click on your website and you have a veteran page, are the stock images of males? Am I going to see myself in that? How can we do a better job to ensure that we're being inclusive and folks see themselves? I'm hopeful for that. I'm hopeful that as we expound on these conversations and more doulas and more providers are becoming more culturally sensitive and bringing cultural humility to the bedside, that we see a shift with veterans being able to say, okay, my provider came in and they had that clipboard, but before they got down to the brass and tacks of that clipboard, they put it down to meet me where I am. And that's my hope. The more experiences you hear about, learn from them. See what we can change in terms of how historically things have been done, right? That sensitivity when you're looking at gender, the same things that might work for males may not work for those that are in the LGBTQIA community, right? Like being intentional and saying there's not a one size fit all. Teach me what I need to know about you so I can serve, support, and care for your needs the best way I can. And it's a journey between you, myself, your caregivers, because the caregivers may not be family. That's a reality. Whoever's caring for you, how can we be this unit? How can we build this ecosystem where your needs are being met?
Beautiful. So good.
Hope.
I wrote it down, Qwynn. I wrote it down. That's a good one. I can't thank you enough. I am like, I hope you don't think it's creepy, but I'm like following you everywhere. And I just want to just shout you from the rooftops. And so don't think of me as being a creeper, admirer, not like that movie, that creepy movie, Miss, what is that called? With Kathy Bates. Anyway, I'm your biggest fan. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Remember that?
Oh my gosh.
Misery,
Misery.
misery.
Writing the book.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's not in a
Yeah.
creepy way, I
Please.
promise. But
Please. No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Just
And I'd
thank
love
you.
for you all, whatever you're doing, if you're on LinkedIn and you want to connect, and if there are things that you want me to amplify that you all are doing, listen, we cannot continue to operate in silos or thinking we can all do it by ourselves. It takes each of us to be able and willing to amplify, to cross-pollinate, to be able to touch every space from urban to rural to everything in between. So if there is something that's going on in your community, there's work that you're doing that you want amplified, please let me know. If you're doing some work and you have a nonprofit that you want to come on to Psych Armor's website, Psych Armor's podcast, we have a podcast called Behind the Mission. Let me know, right? The way that we do this is doing it together. Please don't shoot me a message. Hey, Qwynn, this is what I got. Give me some 48 hours and let's see what we can do to truly continue to make a difference.
Awesome. How can people get a hold of you, my friend?
Once again, I'm on LinkedIn. You can go on to my website and hit the contact us page. If you want to email me, Christine, if you want to share my email address, it's fine. Share my email address if you want to send something directly to me. This is what we do in community together.
I can't thank you enough. Thank you so very much. It's been an
Thank
honor,
y'all.
truly.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all. Please, by all means, thank you. Say that again.
Happy Memorial Day. What a great way to kind of kick off the Memorial Day weekend with your talk.
So,
like the timing was impeccable.
Yeah.
Christine planned it, I'm sure.
Yeah, beautiful. So this Memorial Day, let's honor those that paid the ultimate cost, and let's have a meaningful Memorial Day.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Qwynn.
Thank you.
Have a beautiful evening. I hope you get some sleep tonight. I am forever grateful. I'm so glad that I got to meet you. I'm like so excited to be able to continue sharing your good work that you're doing. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Everyone have an amazing weekend. And my final ask, whatever you're doing on Monday, 3:00, just pause for a minute or two and just honor the sacrifices of those that serve.
Thank you.